Welcome to Own Your Heart Health. I'm Dr. Regina Druz, your holistic cardiologist. This week, we will dive into common heart health concerns, uncovering root causes, and unpacking scientific discoveries and controversies. The information provided does not constitute medical advice. Please contact your healthcare practitioner before making any changes that may impact your health. Hi, everyone. Yet another fun Friday, right? TGIF. Well, today I'm with a great guest, a colleague, someone who is sort of, I say she is like my sister from another mother. And that's Dr. Lara Salyer, who is a functional medicine physician, the founder of the Catalyst Studio, as well as a practitioner who makes us understand how important it is to know what flow is and to be in the flow. And to be honest with you, I always pride myself on being a scientist and, looking at the data. And the data is very strong for the influence of our mindset and our emotional thermostat on what we can actually achieve in things which maybe prior to this were always thought to be just biochemistry or just genetics. And I think that's why Lara is here. And Lara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Regina. It's always fun to share space with you.
Oh, thank you. You're lovely. So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all of my guests. How did you grow up to be a functional medicine doctor, the founder of the Catalyst Studio and the whole flow thing? What is it all about?
Well, I think I resonate with probably a lot of your viewers. If you're listening and you are in a functional or integrative space, many viewers and listeners may have entered in the back door, right? We go to traditional medical school, we go to training, we have been in the system and found that it didn't answer all the questions for our patients. And so maybe some of us may have had our own trials with autoimmune disease or cancer. I mean, you and I know many physicians in this world that have had their own struggles, their own hero's journey. And right. I would say my hero's journey was more burnout. I burned out as a traditional family practice physician in rural Wisconsin. And I loved the job in theory, but I felt like it was just not what I had signed up to be as a DO, as a holistic physician. And when I was ready to resign, I found functional medicine. And then I just launched and thought, my community needs this. And because it was a rural community, they didn't have much education. So I had the mountain of explaining. And it just really helped me hone my creativity quickly to be able to educate them, get the clinic going, and in turn, mentoring physicians, PAs, and nurse practitioners to do the same. Because really, why should we replicate what's not working in healthcare? Why not reinvent a whole new model? And so now my mission is to help women, physicians, PAs, nurse practitioners step into their highest creative power and create that unique work-life masterpiece so that they can practice medicine and love what they do.
That is amazing. And I think we are in many ways in such an exciting era, I think, where the practice models get redefined. And I think in many regards, these practice models are honestly shaped by the type of care people want to receive. Because, my practice model, same as your practice model, I didn't plan on it really as in plan. It sort of revealed itself based on things that were happening professionally and as well as personally. As you're saying, each doc has, their own hero's journey, so the system was really so strained. And, going back in time, I think to myself, was I burnt out, or would I have done it if I didn't even feel burnt out? At that time, burnt out wasn't really an entity that was widely discussed. If the doctors weren't happy, they were just supposed to suck it up, right? It was sort of like, you
we're
just
trained.
Suck it up.
We're very much trained.
We're trained.
Yes.
Never show weakness, never show that you're unhappy, right? And so I think, I think the pivot would have happened for me regardless, but, but I think some degree of burnt out was there. So
sure.
You are a very creative person. I see beautiful drawings right behind you, decorating the walls, absolutely gorgeous. And so what is the Catalyst Studio? What are you bringing forward to practitioners, and how can they, kind of wrap their mind around it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Regina, because I feel that in my excitement and glee, like many new functional medicine practitioners, you're excited to educate, you're passionate, and you start to get into your own zone of genius in your community. And what I started to find is reaching out and networking with other functional practitioners across state lines or in other towns, I started to notice my colleagues would get burned out. And I thought, wait a second, this is supposed to be my next chapter of my medical career. And look at all my colleagues burning out. And so it's like they jumped from the pan into the fire. And what I found is the reason they were burning out is because flow is not in their model. It's not in their day. They are still stuck in the productivity. I've got to rush. I've got to do all the things. And especially hard for women. I mean, studies show that women have, I think it was 20% more time in charting than men. Women have a lot more unspoken societal burdens. We deal with a lot more patients with mental health diagnoses and other things that we're just intuitively better at handling. But then on the flip side, we burn out more. We have 130% more suicide risk than our male colleagues. So here I'm seeing that I left my practice to go into what I thought would be a healthier balance for me. And even I noticed the tendrils of the familiar depersonalization, low perceived achievement, emotional exhaustion, flitting on the sidelines. And I thought, nope, we've got to do something about this. So Catalyst Studio was born out of, like you said, it wasn't planned. It was revealed.
I was revealed.
Did not plan on being a mentor at all. I was just helping out colleagues that came and said, hey, what are you doing? And can you teach me? Sure. And I feel like we're very much co-creating and we're guiding each other. This is, I stand on the shoulders of giants that have taught me. So there is no hierarchy here. But then fast forward 5 years now, and I have this beautiful studio of women physicians from across the world that come together. And the reason we're different and unique is we help our physicians, our nurse practitioners, our PAs build a business that's uniquely their own by using flow neuroscience, by understanding your own ways that you have boundary work needed, by having an attorney come in, help us shape our legal boundaries, having, curriculum that helps you kind of pick and choose your own unique path because you deserve to go to work and feel proud of what you're doing and not feel like you're just clinging and white knuckling your days.
I agree. So let's pull back the curtain from this very mysterious concept. What is flow, and what does the flow neuroscience telling us? And because I find that, what you're saying resonates with me, not just on a professional level as a physician, but when I'm in a patient encounter, I try to establish that flow pattern, whether it happens sort of like I'm not particularly conscious of it, but maybe I should be more conscious and sort of more proactive, right? And even the entire functional medicine model, right? What is the first sort of, step or series of steps, right? We say go to it, right? So this go to it is a very specific functional medicine model that in many ways is anchored in that flow neuroscience. So tell us all about flow and flow neuroscience.
Yes. Oh, I love this question. To understand flow, we need to understand its opposite. And the opposite of flow is grief in the brain. And grief is burnout, that same brainwave pattern in a functional MRI. So if you were to take half of our healthcare practitioners and put them into a functional MRI, their brains would have the same pattern as grief, which is really sludgy and heavy, and you have lots of brain fog and it doesn't feel good, right? And so this is 50% of our healthcare workers going to work every day in a very stuck pattern, right? So the opposite of that is flow, where your brain produces all 5 neurochemicals of happiness, endorphins, anandamide. And what you're doing is you're in the zone. And it's when you feel like you have all 5 senses engaged. All of us can think of times when we're in flow, such as if you're a kid and you're playing soccer or you're playing a musical instrument. These are the most common things people think of. But believe it or not, you're in flow in the shower, because it's an automatic kind of brain dampening time where your alpha brain waves come up and, ideas come to you. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, Regina, but 72% of us have ideas in the shower.
That's why I exercise. And, I noticed, for example, during exercise, there's certainly all of a sudden, my brain gets unburdened and all these creative ideas come. And, one of my classes is a yoga class, and the instructor tends to turn up the temperature a little bit because, this is sort of like, it's not technically hot yoga, but she wants us to be a little bit more limber. And I noticed that, I need, when I get the gym has, I'm in a fancy gym, of course, and the gym has these, eucalyptus infused wet towels. And so when I started using those wet towels and just, wrap them around my neck so that I can continue with everyone else, I noticed that this was such a powerful enhancer to my workout. It put me into that flow state that you're sort of describing, right? And that was a combination of just, it was, multisensorial, the coldness of it, the eucalyptus oil. So, it's sort of like, it was a small thing, but it made such a huge difference.
You're doing this. You're doing it perfectly. You actually got to the next stage of what I was going to talk about, which is flow is actually a 4-cycle phenomenon in the brain. We used to think of flow as like, oh, well, I hope I get in the zone today. I hope I have the creative muse sit on my shoulder. I hope I can get into flow. But actually, with some small steps, you can learn to sequence and strategize your flow. And you gave a great example is you started to attach these flow triggers. You started to almost marry the two, that scent of the eucalyptus with the sweat, with the feeling of wonderful, tingly sensation of working out. And, your body starts to anticipate that. So flow is a 4-phase cycle. And it always starts with struggle. And this is where people give up because they think flow should be easy, but there's actually a little bit of a struggle because you need to have that task feel almost unreachable. If it was too easy, you wouldn't really get into flow. So there has to be some kind of, can I do this?
Like so struggle is phase one. Struggle is phase
one.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Struggle.
And so you have this sense of, I'm not so sure I can do it. Right. And so if it is an easy task, one way that I have people get into flow is make that task harder by setting a smaller time limit. Like if you've got to check off some tasks on your to-do list today and they're all really low cognitive level tasks, then can you do it in 10 minutes? Can you do it? And then you get into flow. So there's ways of gamifying flow in a struggle. Now, the second phase of flow is what you kind of described, which is release. It is the alpha brainwave release trigger. And so there's a list of triggers. Many of them can be looking out in nature, having some quiet time, no distractions. There's a lot of triggers we can do to set up our schedule. And that third phase of flow is the actual flow itself. And it can last anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 hours. And flow can be that time when you're in all 5 senses. You kind of have a distortion of time. Have you ever had that happen where you're like,
right? So you lose the track of time, right?
Yeah, either it goes really fast, or really slow.
Right.
Like your summer, you were saying, my summer's gone so fast,
Exactly.
It's an overarching flow. And the final phase, Regina, the fourth phase, everyone overlooks, including myself. And I have to remind myself every day, the fourth phase is recovery. And we don't do that. We are greedy. Humans want more flow. When we feel good, we want more of it. So we go immediately to the next task. We might even scroll on our phone because we're just killing time between patient appointments, or we might, look at something else, and we forget recovery is so important. And that actually is silence, repetitive. It's unplugging. It's not stimulating your brain with more blue light. It's nature. It's really like organic nothingness. And that allows all those receptors to reset. It allows you to then be able to invite flow back again for that next chapter.
I have to say that this is amazing because one of the things, so two things related to that. So you probably just as I and as many of our patients and other listeners, I of course use my Aura Ring repeatedly. I'm a huge fan. And I noticed one of the most recent updates, I guess, to their algorithm was the tracking of resiliency. And when they track resiliency, they look at a number of parameters. They're all physiologic parameters, your heart rate variability, your daytime stress, your sleep variables, and they put it together in various algorithms, and it spits out a certain level of resiliency. And it's sort of a graph, and we monitor it with our patients. We have a dashboard where all the wearable information comes in, because we understand how impactful sleep and stress resiliency actually are. But what an interesting observation is that using this resiliency marker, I noticed that Aura was often flagging me for excessive daytime stress. Right.
Oh,
so
yeah.
excessive daytime stress. And so I said to myself, I'm a huge fan of these exercise snacks, and, I appreciate the patients. Why don't I have rest snacks, sort of micro breaks? And so I started taking, those little micro breaks. And, fortunately, for the most part, I work from home, and I go to my office when I have to. And so I'm like, let me start taking those little micro breaks when I sort of feel like I need to just like a minute or two, maybe just a drink of cold water, walk around the block, walk my dog, nothing too fast, maybe just sit and stare at my flowers, which is, right now it's summer, so I can sit and stare at my flowers, right?
Yes.
And so what I noticed with this is that previously, my stress resiliency was a roller coaster. I would be sometimes in a great place. It said exceptional or, strong. And then in the next few days, I will totally tank. And so it literally looked like this, right? Like a roller coaster. But since I started doing those little micro breaks, I'm actually much less of a roller coaster ride. So I don't have the very high highs and don't have the very low lows. I'm still fluctuating, but I'm mostly in the solid or strong zone. And, and I think that speaks to what you're describing, that recovery is critical.
Yeah. It really is. It gives your brain, let's think about it. We use our prefrontal cortex all day long, thinking, analyzing, making decisions. And that's why you see candy at the checkout counter, because any mom knows when you've got 3 kids in the cart and you're tired after a long day and your willpower's down. So your prefrontal cortex is not making decisions anymore. And when they're reaching for that candy and begging, you're going to go, yeah, put it in the cart. It's fine. It's fine.
Let's go.
And so let's go. And that's why, our minds are just so interesting and fascinating, because here we are using that, but our beautiful creative alpha brainwaves are just as important, because they're the ones paying attention 24/7 to things in the background. You might even call it intuition. You might call it, just these unspoken, the smells in your environment, all the things that you're not cognitively aware of, but suddenly you go for a run and you remember, oh my goodness, my great aunt's birthday is next week, and the flowers I just smelled on the trail, I've got to buy her flowers. Like, your brain will make these connections in flow, and it's a wonderful thing to have,
Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Regina here. I know there are contradictory opinions about nutrition for heart health and longevity. Discussion often gets heated and confusing. There are those who push for low fat, low cholesterol. Then there are fans of a ketogenic diet. There are many anti-meat voices as well, suggesting vegan or vegetarian style of eating. With all the chatter out there on what and how to eat, my team and I decided to create a tool for patients, medical professionals to clear the clutter. It is called Holistic Heart University, and it provides on-demand courses, nutrition and lifestyle resources, information on supplements to make it easier to understand how to make healthy choices for your heart. I'm especially proud of our open office hours for program patients and the Q&A feature where you get to ask your individual questions and put us in the hot seat. Head out to the show notes for the link and use my special promo code to get a huge 20% off on our annual health and wellness subscription. The code is OWNER20, and I'll see you in the office hours. So is there then, since you developed a method, I believe, right, that teaches practitioners how to harness the power of all four phases of flow, right? So tell us, because I'm so intrigued by this, and I almost feel like you can think of it. There are examples of this in everyday life, right? If you walk, for example, into a luxury hotel, or you arrive into a beautiful destination, it's such a multi-sensory, uplifting set of experiences that it kind of switches you into the flow phase, right? Whether you are aware of it or not. So how do you teach practitioners, and I'm assuming you're doing the same strategy with your patients, how do you sort of
Yes.
take them from stage to stage, or
That's
is there even a way to do this?
Yes, there is. And it is like you understand with functional medicine patient care, every case is different, every person's different. So what I've done is built the framework, but everyone's ingredients and recipes might vary a little. And, it's really a chance to have self-discovery on your own unique flow recipe, because it can be seasonal. Like you mentioned, you love looking at your flowers in the summertime. Well, in the winter, you might have a different flow recipe, right?
Of course.
And so it's sort of a nice self-excavation where you learn what puts me into flow. And really it is about energy management, right? You and I know this. When we don't protect our energy, or we're really depleted, not only will our aura ring yell at us, but we don't feel very good. It's not easy to get into flow. So the reason I start with the energy management is because that is going to help get practitioners into flow. And what that means is calendar. We practice time alchemy. We are very diligent and discerning on what deserves a spot in our calendar. And so the 3-step way that practitioners can learn to get into flow is we retroactively solve for the burnout equation. So if you think of burnout, it's 3 things. It's depersonalization, low perceived achievement, emotional exhaustion. So the 3-step program for the AHA method, which is AHA, creative epiphany, it's AHA. So we anchor our calendar, we anchor our decisions, we anchor our time management into our values. And so we check our values quarterly, we check it annually. We make sure that we're staying on alignment with our values, that things are, if they're shifting, which they will, that we then change our decisions and what goes in our calendar and what projects we say yes to. And if we continue anchoring even every day, things that we find meaningful, it could be as simple as a gratitude journal. Anybody can start one of those, right? So you're anchoring every day into meaningful, value-driven decisions of your time. Then the second step is highlighting your achievements, because when we are feeling burned out, even as a functional medicine practitioner, that can be super complicated to guide patients through change.
Sure.
So highlighting those mini accomplishments with your patient, with yourself, highlighting new areas that triggered you, because that's a great opportunity to investigate boundaries and to look at, how did I let my time and energy go?
Right.
What more do I want in my life? That kind of thing. And then the last is activating flow. The last A is my favorite part, because that is a series of being a wise on what flow triggers you can set or flow disruptors you can remove. We all know the 5R protocol of functional medicine, right?
Sure.
And so sometimes you have to remove some flow disruptors. And I'll tell you what, this is a big one here, a flow disruptor.
Your phone.
Yeah, putting your phone in a phone jail, when you're working, make it whimsical, start gamifying things to make it easy. I love using timers. I use timers as much as I can. So then it lets your brain rest, and then you're not going to be late and you can get right into flow. And so activating flow with some of these flow triggers, flow disruptor removals, it can be really life-changing.
So I'm very intrigued by this. What are flow triggers, and what are flow disruptors? Like, can you give a little bit more detail into that?
Sure. A flow trigger will actually raise your dopamine levels. It makes it more likely for your brain to slip into that neuroscience flow cycle loop. So things like even humor, laughing at a good joke.
Laughing.
If you have a YouTube playlist of comedy that you just will die laughing each time, that actually raises your oxytocin, your dopamine. You'll more likely be able to slip into a flow cycle. Other flow triggers are practicing gratitude, being out in nature, things that feel loving, comforting, even having a spiritual practice. These are flow triggers. So the more
Or
you can
exercise, as it is for
Yes.
me, exercise is a very big flow trigger.
Yes, exercise, repetitive, motions, drumming, knitting, things that are bilateral, like running. All these things are great flow triggers. And then flow disruptors are things that lower your dopamine. They break your concentration. Things like a toxic work environment is definitely a flow disruptor.
It's a flow annihilator.
Yes.
Flow terminator.
Right. Any kind of interruptions, and people don't realize every time you're interrupted, you lose the equivalent of 1 to 3 IQ points.
Wow.
So if you look right now at your email and you see that you got 3 email messages, even though you think, oh, that was nothing, it's ruining your flow. You can't get back into flow. So doing this unitask, not multitask, but just really be careful about disruptions, that and removing any kind of interruption can be huge. The other thing a lot of practitioners don't realize is just how are they taking care of their physiology? You're doing great with your Aura Ring. You're paying attention to your biometrics and you're looking, but a lot of practitioners, we are so invested in our patient. Sometimes we forget about ourselves. So fueling our body well is another way to help promote flow. So these are just some examples.
Very interesting. And, and I think it's if we were to sort of expand the application of it, right? It's not just for practitioners, because I find that this works really, really well for my patients. And there actually are studies coming out sort of that are not specifically looking at flow, but it occurred to me recently, US pointer trial was reported on the efficacy of kind of, fairly straightforward lifestyle approaches to patients with early cognitive decline. And what was interesting, the study got a little bit of press, maybe not too much press. And you and I we have expected these findings. But what was interesting is that the group that did the best in this trial was a group that had a structured program. They weren't just, people who were consult as to what these things are that they're supposed to do. They were actually given a sort of a blueprint, right? They were held accountable. And all of those things that you said were there to kind of, certain elements of flow were part of that program. And I think this is so important because we try to work with patients in a way that holds them accountable by giving them very specific structured interventions. And one thing that I observed after working with hundreds of patients, and I'm sure you're going to agree with it, because patients ask all the time, well, will it work for me? Right. And I used to think that the most important variables would be, well, what is their blood work and what is their genetics? Or maybe what supplements they're going to be on, or maybe what nutritional plan they were going to be on. And I learned over the years that the most important variable is them. Because if they are committed and consistent and compliant with the program workflow, they get a fantastic result. But if they are not in the flow, as you're saying, of our interventions, the result is very average, and sometimes there is no result. And I think
yes.
Do you agree with this?
Yeah, I love what you highlighted, because you're highlighting several things. It's also an interconnection of what you're describing, which is trust. Is we have to trust. And there is this very scary part of flow that feels like it's just this undefinable thing out there. So a lot of practitioners and patients feel that they can't trust themselves to let go into flow, right? And you're saying the same thing about your program, that it really makes a difference if you can just trust and know that it's not always going to be black and white and laid out for you. But if you can trust the magic of you will unfold along this path and your body will adapt and you will learn, and you can trust the beautiful healing that can happen in a group as well. I mean, studies show that women physicians that are burned out, if they're enrolled in a coaching program with groups, they actually fare better. They have better resiliency scores, well-being. I mean, we thrive in community. And so all of this that you're doing as well highlights that humans need that.
Oh, absolutely. And I just had that conversation yesterday. And, it occurred to me that, we talk about blue zones so often. And one of the very important elements that all blue zones share is community, right? Because they're geographically different. The nutritional patterns have certain things that are common, but they're not one-to-one sort of, same things that people eat. They're not the same levels of activity, even though most people in those blue zones are active. But it is the community aspect, which is so remarkable, that is, really anchors that wellness in place through a group of humans that are bound together. They're not necessarily close friends, but they're bound together in a place and the environment, and they make it work for them. So super interesting. So question for you, can flow be measured?
Ooh, I think in research trials, and I don't know how they measured this, but when I was training with the Flow Research Collective, they did say that it can increase productivity 500% if you're in flow, and increase the generation of creative ideas 250%. So they measured that on disclosed scales, but I'm not sure like metrically how they can measure that in the brain.
Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Regina here. Many of my colleagues and I are noticing patients coming to us with self-ordered blood tests. When this trend started to gain momentum, I thought it would benefit many patients. After all, who doesn't want more access to health testing? However, I see that self-ordered labs often lead to more confusion and frustration for our patients. Patients are coming in with a pile of labs, and sadly, they're not better off for it. This is why we at Holistic Heart Centers have launched Heartwell Toolkits, a curated collection of blood and genetic markers that one can get at home, focused on heart and brain health, gives you all the data you need to make informed and actionable health decisions. The toolkits can be ordered at our shop on holisticheartcenters.com. You can find the link in the show notes. Use the code TESTING10 to get 10% off and free shipping. So how do you know when you, for example, work with your practitioners, right? What kind of tasks or milestones do you look at to make a decision? Are they achieving some of those, I guess, flow objectives, flow breakthroughs, or not? What reveal the path for us?
Yes. Yeah. So that is a great question too. And I'm a big fan. The older I get and the more years of medicine under my belt, the more I really am embracing somatic awareness. So I really encourage my practitioners and my patients. I do this in my clinic as well. I try to help, kind of unvelcro them from the data. Like everybody wants to see their numbers get better. And yes, that would be great. But sometimes the numbers are the lagging metric. The leading metric is that you feel fantastic, And then I do that for my coaching and mentoring for practitioners, is asking them, how is your time management? Are you getting things done? Are you making really good decisions that feel good in your body? Where do you feel that in your body? We do a lot of this somatic talk in my coaching, because that's truly your pilot light. That is what is your beacon of, shining light where you're going. If you feel overwhelmed, frazzled, you feel tight in your throat, then something's wrong. You're not in flow. Right. So we go based on feeling and also the goals. How close are you to getting your goals achieved? Or are there little milestones along the way? Snacks, if you will, like you said, that you're able to enjoy.
The breadcrumbs, remember? Yeah. Hansel and Gretel, those are the breadcrumbs.
Yes, because life is here not to be over hyper productive and achieving. I mean, we're all recovering high achievers. It's also here to be enjoyed and savored and just felt. And so that's what flow is, the gift for you, to feel it and to be fully alive and human and enjoy that moment.
So this is so true, and I have to tell you that we recently, my obviously I have patient coordinators that I work with, and they're absolutely great because a lot of prospective patients, when we do our discovery calls, and for the first time get a chance to meet someone who is potentially looking to work with us, we used to basically allow patients to take these calls anywhere they want. And then I said, you know what? That's really not the best circumstance, not just for us, but for a prospective patient, because they deserve to be present and aware what this discussion is all about. So if they're multitasking, if they are, as you said, struggling to get their kids to their after school programs, or driving somewhere, or this is the middle of a work day which is very intense, this is probably not the best time to have this conversation, because this is, as you're saying, flow disruptor, right, or a flow
Mm-hmm.
buster, and
Yep.
and that does not allow anyone to stay focused, to be present, or even to understand what the path is in front of them. So, we became much more aware that the circumstances, the environment needs to be right. So what do you tell patients, practitioners? Do you advise them somehow to structure or to change their surroundings, sort of like, can they curate their environment to be in the flow, like what's the, what are the opportunities there?
Absolutely. And this is fun to do. Part of it is fun for me because I get to learn all the new things people do that I never heard of, but everybody's unique. So we usually talk about, especially in this work from home environment, do you have a dedicated workspace where it's only work? It's about cultivating your favorite things, the lighting, the smells, comforts, are you warm? How's your body temperature? All the things, right? You can do that, but you can
Mm-hmm.
also incorporate rituals, the power up and power down rituals that signal to your body,
Okay.
much like your eucalyptus towel. That's going to
Mm-hmm.
tell your brain, hey, I'm going to be working out. And so a lot of my practitioners, and myself included, I will have a short power up routine in the morning just to get myself ready and going. And I'll pepper in flow recovery breaks throughout my day because I do my time blocking. And sometimes those breaks, depending on the weather, is a walk outside. Sometimes it's not, but working with practitioners to find their unique joys and the ways that they like to experience the world is part of the fun. We can strategically make flow better, easier, and more productive.
Mm-hmm.
And then you work less hours and you're able to be done sooner because you are more productive when you're optimized, and then
Interesting.
the power down routine in the evening, turning off everything, making sure, you're grateful for your work that you get to do, say, whatever, feels good for you, sign off, close the lights, whatever, and some kind of routine that signals that you are finished. And your brain loves that kind of clear cut. The worst thing is taking that laptop and trying to do charts in front of the TV or other things like that. It just doesn't work.
So very, very interesting. So it almost makes me think like the flow is, in many ways, essentially your brain operating system, right?
Yep.
So it's a brain operating system, and just, I guess, as a computer, you can power up and you can power down. So tell us about your power up routine. I'm very intrigued by that. What is your power
Yes.
up routine? If you tell me
Well,
yours, I'll tell you mine, right?
I
But
love
so
it.
it's,
Let's do
so
it.
it's one of
Let's
those.
do it. Yes. So my power up routine right now for the summer in Wisconsin is I will get up and go out on my deck as soon as possible to see if I can see the sunlight in the horizon.
Mhm.
And I like to have it in my face, if I can. And I will get my morning pages journal. If you're not familiar with what morning pages is, it's from the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And this was written
Mhm.
decades ago, but she launched a revolution where she encourages free writing. It's like taking your dog to the dog park and letting them run
Letting
around,
them run. Uh-huh.
get their energy out. That's what you're doing for your brain because all your brain does is secretes 70,000 thoughts per day. So if you let it purge in the very first part of your day, you're going to think clearer for the rest of the day. So it's free writing. There's no rules. You don't even have to be able to read it. So I'll sit out there and I'll just free write, and I set a timer. That's the other thing, is if you set a timer, then you're more likely to let your brain go because you're not subconsciously worried about the time and if you're going to be late. So I set a timer for 10, 15 minutes. I free write. Then I go inside. I start, getting ready, showering, doing all the makeup. And while I'm doing makeup or getting ready, I listen to affirmations on Insight Timer about gratitude, about, what my day is going to look like. And then I'm ready to go. That's pretty much my routine, my power up routine. What's yours?
So mine is a little bit less complex. So I'm definitely learning. I should incorporate a couple of things. So it's summer right now, right? And when the weather is good, because I'm also in New York, so not as cold as Wisconsin, but, certainly not Florida or Texas. And so what I love is that I get up early, I get my glass of water and my first cup of coffee, and I'll go into my backyard and sit on a little, chair. And my dog is like sitting right next to me after she finished running her circles, and I love watching her run the circles and, watch all the flowers and the trees and listen to all the noises that filter off the street. And then she sits down next to me and, it's always sort of like body to body, I could feel her warmth, and like her intent, her like, so, and it's very therapeutic because, the time is slow and I can, I don't think any specific thoughts. I'm just grateful in the moment, for being able to have something like this. And,
That's
it's
lovely.
super rejuvenating and, doesn't even take that much. And I do have a little gratitude corner in my home office. I look at the pictures of my kids and, my husband with me and, various places, so it's there. It's in, as I walk in, it's straight sort of down in my line of sight. And that's kind of the I guess the bookend, right? That ends my power up routine and I'm ready to go.
I love it. It sounds like you have a beautiful, energetic practice. That's lovely.
Yeah. Even
Love
without
it.
calling it the energetic practice. Now, I have to work on power down because my power
That's a hard
down.
one.
No, it's a very hard one because the power down is sort of, watching Netflix, but that's not a power down.
Oh, don't worry. I am no master at it. It really depends on my day. Oh yeah, it's hard. And I feel like sometimes my life is like Netflix saying, "Are you still watching? Are you still doing this?
Are you still doing this?" So what would you recommend as a power down routine? What do you find works?
Yeah, I've tried a bunch of little things, so I'm always open for suggestions. But for me, what works well is setting an alarm. I'm all about alarms because I tend to wander my thoughts, but setting an alarm that is, just reminding me, okay, because I'm sure you're the same, but I shouldn't speak for you. We could probably tweak and work all through the night because I can always see somewhere I can improve, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes us great, I think, because we can improve and we can see, oh, you know what, that website landing page could be a little bit better here, or this, process that the patient goes through could be a little more easy here. And so I have to tell myself to stop, or else I would always tweak, especially working from home. So I have an alarm that is saying, okay, you're done. And the alarm is now. Yeah, the alarm is usually my kid having to get picked up somewhere. And I'm like, okay, it's 3:00. I've got to go. And then that's it. I don't really have much of a routine other than I thank the universe for the work I have. I shut my computer down, turn off all my lights, and then I close the door. And I have plants here. You can't see them much, maybe a few, maybe. And I just talk to my plants and I say, well, thank you for keeping me company. And, go ahead and clean the air while I'm gone, make it a fresh new day for tomorrow. And that's it. That's kind of all I do.
It's so funny because I talk to my dog because usually she's sort of like, somewhere laying here, sort of supervising me, kind of in her, very relaxed pose. And I'm like, okay, Ginger, that's it. We're done for the day. And so
your dog's name is Ginger too. That's my dog's name.
Oh, is it really? Oh. Well, she looks like Ginger because she's red-haired dog. But, but what you're saying is definitely making a lot of sense because I noticed that since I incorporated kind of more definitive times to stop and these micro breaks. Yes, there are, of course, days and times when, let's say, there are certain deadlines and I have to
Mm-hmm.
meet them, right? So
Yeah.
this, it's going to happen that, you work overtime, you work
Yep.
later hours than
Yep.
usual, but it's no longer taking my resiliency the way that it used to. I'm no longer in that roller coaster, on a much more even sort of ride, and definitely appreciate the impact of it, because physiologically it makes a lot of sense. You notice, and
Yes.
the way that, at least I asked you earlier, is it possible to measure flow? So we default honestly to measuring the biometrics, right? Because of
Mm-hmm.
these resiliency parameters. And if you don't have resiliency parameters, I find that just HRV by itself, heart rate
Mm-hmm.
variability, is a very reasonable measure,
Yeah.
But, if you have a fancy tracker, like you and I both have Aura rings, or people use Apple
Mm-hmm.
Watch or whatever, but, like your sleep efficiency, your resiliency level, your HRV, you kind of could follow through on all of these and see, are they actually trending up, or are they
Mm-hmm.
sort of tanking, right? So that we use that as sort of a surrogate measure, because I could tell you that when I see HRV trend up, when I see resiliency improve, I can virtually guarantee that either myself or that patient would come back and they would feel so much better. So these
Yeah.
physiologic parameters, right? They're great.
Yes.
Yes. So can one, let me just sort of, maybe not measure flow, but of all of these like four phases, right? You
Mm-hmm.
said struggle,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Release. Mm-hmm.
release, flow, and
Mm-hmm.
recovery.
Mm-hmm.
How does one know which of those four phases still needs work?
Oh, that's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Um, That's a great question. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way because, if we're trying to science it, there's many researchers that would say, really, are we able to know when you've passed to the recovery
Mm-hmm.
stage and you're back into struggle? Because it's all intermixed based on what tasks you're looking to, gamify
Mm-hmm.
or flow. So I think when I'm coaching somebody, especially if they're just using the one-on-one Catalyst Advantage sessions, these are practitioners that just want personal coaching. They're not really interested in building a business. They just want to have more management on their time and really learn
Mm-hmm.
how to get into flow. So what I do there is we just sort of do a time inventory, like an audit. Where do
Okay.
you find yourself more distracted or procrastinating? Sometimes you procrastinate because you're trying to get into flow. It's your own body's way of increasing
Mm-hmm.
the risk and therefore the dopamine. And so that way you get the thing done faster. So we kind of do a little bit of a
We
look
see it in
back to
our
the
kids all the time, right?
yeah, yeah. And so we do kind of like a week look back and a strategy saying, okay, where are the moments that you wish it could have been easier, but it wasn't? And then on the flip side, where are the moments that you sailed through and you're like, oh my gosh, I got that done
Mm-hmm.
faster than I thought. And then through that data, we kind of come together and find the areas that maybe they're struggling with more flow disruptors, or maybe it's actually they didn't set any flow triggers, or maybe they're not, all these little things pop out of the woodwork when we look at their calendar.
Very interesting. So, so flow triggers and flow disruptors is a big one, a big takeaway for me here, as well as sort of sending or setting these time periods, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of dedicated blocks to when you do certain things, because that creates a lot of structure. And,
Mm-hmm.
brain, as you said, it
Love
loves
structure.
structure.
Yeah.
People think that brain's supposed to be in chaos, but and you sound you supposed to be brainstorming and multitasking, but that actually wears you down. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember I read somewhere, unfortunately, I didn't remember the author, that someone said, "You don't find time, you make time." And it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like that strategy, of flow is really the strategy of making time that is most aligned with who you are and what you want to do, so
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
absolutely.
So what resources are out there that our listeners could potentially tap into? First of all, how can practitioners who wish to work with you, how can they find you? And
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
and the second one is, if someone is interested in flow, sort of the concept of
Mhm.
flow, could you recommend any resources, any books to read,
Ooh,
any
yeah.
websites, sort of training programs? Like after listening to you, I feel like maybe I should go through a training program. So, what's out there?
Well, there's so much. Okay, so boy, now my brain is in flow. It's like I've got all these things to say. So my website for any practitioner that would like to work with me, whether it's just one-on-one or interested in the business mentorship, it's drlarasalyer.com, and you'll head to the Catalyst page, and there's many options. There's lots of freebies. I would love to talk with you in a brainstorming session to help you with your next steps. And it's just a joy I have. I love connecting with practitioners. For you, Regina, I would love to email you a list of flow triggers and disruptors that you could give the audience.
Amazing. We
So,
absolutely will do that.
yeah, it's a master list that I've compiled from my training of all the
Okay.
flow triggers and disruptors, so that there's like a checklist and people can play with that. And as far as resources, oh my goodness, there is so many. So many. I'm thinking at the top of my head, even though they weren't involved in my flow training, The Atomic Habit by James Clear is a classic, right? Everybody's read that one. Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert is another good one to talk about this harnessing of creative flow power. I received my training from Flow Research Collective, and I really love their training programs. They have many different ones because I am probably like you. I was a glutton and took all 3 training programs, but they have some bite-sized ones that are for just like getting from zero to dangerous is their flagship training that just helps you with
From
your time
zero to
management.
dangerous. I love that. Getting from zero to dangerous.
Yeah. And I really liked their top of the line training for leadership. And that's what I really liked, but any of them are great. And if you want to learn more, I've got a podcast, The Catalyst Way. I mean, listen, I have an episode every week, and I talk a lot about time management, flow acquisition, especially when it relates to medicine and falling in love with your career again.
Yeah, I listened to your episodes and they're absolutely great. And I think the resources that you're mentioning all sound fantastic. And I would actually encourage not just practitioners, but honestly, any adult who is, dealing with all the complexities of adult life, especially when we get to be in that middle-aged, interesting zone where some of our control is no longer there. And, our body is beginning to send us signals that maybe we're not the same, going back to, I don't know if you were the fan of Sex and the City franchise,
Right.
but they just came out, not just, they came out with a sequel. It's called And Just Like That. And, and literally in the first episode of the first season, one of the major characters suffers a fatal heart attack. And I said to myself, this is this is really how they frame the middle-aged, right? Because the 30-somethings are now 50-somethings, and
right?
and this is what that 50-something actually is, and I think it is a very flow sounds to me like a very powerful longevity tool. And I think,
absolutely,
right?
Yes.
And people, my point of view, I always tell people when it comes to longevity, don't buy into hype and hope, because the real longevity is very hard. And, and you need to be honest as to what it actually is. And, and establishing these flow patterns is just as difficult as becoming metabolically flexible again, in middle aged, or improving your cardiovascular endurance. These are all really impactful longevity opportunities that people may not even know about. So
absolutely.
The checklist, the resources would be very much appreciated. If, to our listeners, will put Dr. Lara's checklist of flow triggers and flow disruptors into the show notes. So you can always go and download that. And as well as the books that you recommended, they're well-known books. So certainly Atomic Habits. And hopefully this will be something that people will take to heart and say, am I in the flow or not? Let's check it today and let's get there.
And, I would have to say, I can't believe how much overlap there is between our worlds because, you talk about metabolic flexibility, and that's exactly what flow and creativity is. It's a physiologic flexibility of being able to just adapt and have increased capacitance for things you love in life. And I'd be amiss if I didn't mention, check out my book, Right Brain Rescue by Dr. Lara Salyer. I forgot all about that. I talk about flow.
And actually, to our listeners, if you're listening to us, thank you as always. But if you are actually watching this episode on YouTube, you could see phenomenal artwork by Dr. Lara. You can see a copy of her book on her shelf, Right Brain Rescue. And, she's an extraordinary artist on top of being an extraordinary doc. And this was such a pleasure. I think I was in the flow state during this episode.
Same.
So thank you, Lara.
Thank you so much.
You got it. Hi to all professionals listening to us today. If you're thinking of launching a cardiometabolic or integrative cardiology program in your practice, we can help. At the Holistic Card Centers, we help docs in practice to expand into hybrid or concierge services. Head out to the show notes and click on the application link. Your intro call is entirely free. Ready to schedule a practice review? Use code DOC10 for 10% off our Practice Power Hour 16 minutes coaching session. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in to Own Your Heart Health with Dr. Regina Druz. This podcast is powered by Holistic Card Centers. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about our services, visit holisticcardcenters.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The link is in the show notes. See you next week.